Hi, welcome to this episode of Kibbitzing with Kagan. I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Today I have a really special guest, Chief Marcus Jones, the head of Montgomery County's Police Department. Chief Jones, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So first, let me just start with a broader thank you. Thank you for your career of 33 years and counting in law enforcement. And it is hard to be in policing right now. Let me just ask to start, I guess, how are you doing? How are you holding up?
I'm hanging in there. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. There's some significant challenges that have been put before me since I started as the chief here in Montgomery County. But I tell you, it's really refreshing to know you have a lot of support from within, from family, which is vitally important. And that's important. And when you have friends and who always pick up the phone and call you and check on you. And that's important. It's important to have a good support base. Yes.
No question. So you took over about a year and a half ago now, and Chief Tom Manger, your predecessor, was there for about 15 years as chief. Did you make any particular changes when you came on to kind of put your stamp on it?
Yeah, so we're really in the midst of doing a few changes that we are working towards and have done. One of the things I'm in the midst of doing is a reorganization within our department. We're actually going to create more of a centralized focus on our traffic division and really addressing traffic concerns across the county in a more just one general focus as we work towards Vision Zero and looking at really cutting down on the number of collisions that we have in the county, as well as pedestrian collisions, and looking at safety measures and helping to work through some issues, particularly on our major arterial roadways, and to have more of a functionality with our rush hour traffic.
No question.
In the AM and the PMs, both. So we generally have done some things in the morning, but we've never really had this concentrated effort in the evening. So we're going to make that more centralized, and we're looking at more efficiencies throughout the department in order to help some of our other units that need that support base. We're actually creating a fifth bureau that will be more community resources. It will be under Community Resources Bureau will be the name of it. And we'll be focusing a lot on some changes in our policies, as well as community engagement to have that central focus out of that bureau. And, to work towards a lot around our policing model, to have a policing model that deals with, when we're looking at statistics and looking at, how do we actually police in certain based upon what we're seeing on the data. So that's going to be very evidence-based policing is really where the main focus will be in that regard.
Good.
Yeah.
So I have to give a shout out to Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr on Vision Zero. I think it launched in Rockville a number of years ago, and she was the leader on that when she was on the city council.
Yes.
So shifting to the biggest elephant in the room, which is we just got the verdict late last week in the Derek Chauvin trial in Minneapolis. That has resonated everywhere around the country and around the world, and especially in police departments. Why don't you talk about what that's been like for you personally, as an African-American man, as a chief, and as a chief of a large police department?
Yeah, I mean, starting from the very beginning, I mean, I've said this many Zoom calls and community meetings about, being one of the worst things I've seen in law enforcement, when I just saw the behavior of then the officer, Derek Chauvin. And it just, it's amazing because we've always had this conversation about, about our profession and about whatever happens in other cities, whether it was, it doesn't matter where it happens, whether it's Minneapolis, whether it's LA, whether it's New York, or even in our smaller venues, it affects us all, right? It has this impact on us all. And so that had right off the jump, when we saw much of the protests that were occurring, and we had our fair share here in the county. I mean, we had over 120 protests throughout last summer and into the fall, centered around, much of that discussion about police reform and, all of the issues about demanding, that policing is, Black Lives Matter and all of that. And so that was, and though we had these peaceful protests, we also had really great dialogue with many community members who hadn't really engaged with police departments or our staff at all. Right. It was great to connect with some of our communities and community members because that allowed us to be able to have a discussion. And one of the things that I have always stressed about, when you have a department, a police department that works in your community, it's this two-way street of relationship building. And that's important for success, for us to have, to be able to build trust, to be, not only to be transparent, and to really have, but when you have a relationship with someone, you're not scared to have the discussion that needs to be had.
That's right.
And that's what I think this has helped to internally with our department and many of the leaders in my department to help them understand the true importance. And they noticed, but I think it was much more, in front of us than we've ever seen it before, right? That it required us to really have have these heart-to-heart conversations. And it's really about not only just talking, but listening, right? Listening to the other side. And we all say policing, in my mind, policing is local. So your community demands what they want from their particular police department, and particularly when you have 18,000 police departments in the country, right? And so every community doesn't want the same thing, right? And I think that's an interesting dynamic when we have to build these relationships.
So can you tell us briefly how Montgomery County's police department is similar to or different from others around the state or around the country?
Well, I would say, when we say a little bit different, right? I think, again, I think we do focus on, and I think a lot of police departments focus a lot about community policing and how they actually do outreach. But again, every community is different. You have different community leaders, you have different demands, and we're a very diverse community, and that requires our police department to really expand its, acceptance of the different cultures that we address, religions and beyond, because we have a very unique community and, large in some, centers of the diversity. We have, large communities that have, different needs that we have to address, and we have to be connected to and really have developed these relationships in order, again, to build that trust. Right. And so I think, a lot of times I've talked to other police chiefs in the state of Maryland, as an example, or across the Fairfax or, across the river. And, these sometimes the conversation is a little bit different because sometimes the politics might be different, right? The community is different. And so we all have to learn how to sort of address and adapt what our community demands of us, and be able to share that and be able to make sure that our officers are going out and they understand the message is clear.
So as the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, I have to ask how you work with local police departments. Right. Gaithersburg and Rockville are both led by terrific chiefs as well.
Absolutely.
And right. I wonder how you navigate where there's overlap, where is there conflicting areas that need to be addressed?
Yeah, no, I tell you, we have a fabulous working relationship, and working with Chief Stroka and Chief Brito. We talk often. We talk about the issues that are centered around public safety. Of course, they're responding along with my officers on calls for service. And no, we know that the city of Gaithersburg and the city of Rockville, sometimes there are a little bit higher demands on their department about some of the things that they're providing. Again, going back to my now this says the policing is local, right? And there may be certain demands, but we are always there to support them in any of in during their time of needs, of course, because we have more resources to be able to provide to assist them. We're always here to assist them in whatever they need from that perspective. And I think, again, it goes because we're all on the same mission, and, providing a best public safety service possible, and, doing it in an effective way. And so just because Rockville City sits in the middle of my first district, or Gaithersburg City sits in the parts of Gaithersburg, Montgomery Village Station, there's still support that we provide them when needed, right? And we're still going on the same calls for service that they might go on. And sometimes you may get to Gaithersburg city officers and never have a county officer come by, and that's okay, right? But we always know that if they need us, we're always there. Sometimes if they don't have someone available, we'll send one or two of our officers there to back them up. So yeah, I cherish the relationship between both of those departments, because it is, to me, it's vitally important for us to be on the same page, because we're providing generally, the very same service as everyone else. Yeah.
So let's pivot to legislation if we could. And again, I have a million questions to run through with you. Police reform was near the very, very top of the agenda of the 2021 legislative session. The Senate started off with a package of bills, and we had 9 bills that we sent over. The House had 1. There was compromise and debate and all that, and ultimately, as you know, we passed 5 new laws, and the governor vetoed 3 of them. And anyway, it's still ongoing.
Sure.
Which aspects were you pleased to see moved forward legislatively? Which concerned you?
Yeah, I will say, I think the discipline piece that the legislators focused on was important. I think the law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights, there needed to be really more clarity in the process. And overall, I would say it did. I think it clarified that, particularly like in Montgomery County, with a strong union. We have a very strong union, as people know, with the Fraternal Order of Police, and part of the disciplinary process was brought into the collective bargaining agreement, and is a part of that until it expires in 2023. But and now it really helps. The new legislation helps to clarify that. I mean, there'll still be some challenges, I think, that we're still going to have to work through with the establishments of the police accountability boards, as well as the hearing boards, as we move forward, and because of that now will encompass the entire county, to include the municipalities as a part of that, because they are a law enforcement agency. So we'll have to work through the logistics there. But I think, that if there was, and the other part was the fact about the employee records being, which I know, which is a major issue.
I did love that aspect, I have to say. Even false and inaccurate accusations were going to be. I did not like that, actually. Yeah,
I will say that I did not like that piece of it at all. I mean, the one thing I think that's a challenge, and particularly in law enforcement, is that the public has these, just like we were talking about with the George Floyd case. The public has this real strong desire to know about police officers being disciplined, and they want to see that. They want to see what is that, right? And And I think that's the fine line that has always been, whether you protect it or you don't protect it, right? What other profession allows you to know what's in your employee discipline file, as a matter of fact, right? But when you're being accused of things that are false and inaccurate, I think that's really unfair. I mean, what do we draw? Where do we draw from these conclusions about when those actors, because that does happen. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And yeah.
So as you know, but not everyone watching may know, is that much of this legislation won't go into effect until 2023, which means that we've got the time to come back next year in 2022 and revisit, tweak some things, maybe see, learn some more, and maybe
I would tell you the one piece of legislation that I think it's a little bit concerning. I think it's in regards to search warrant service, and I think totally understand people's feeling. Yes,
not warrants.
Yes, and just through the operation of notice and things of that nature, I am concerned a little bit about officer safety from that perspective. I will say, when looking at through our records, and we did some research on this, and really, we've served somewhere an incredible number over 20, really over a longer period, 30-year history in our SWAT team, for example. And every search warrant's not actually conducted by our SWAT teams, but the more high volatile type of cases are. And when we have the record that we have, I think when we look at the amount of shootings that we have, we've done them really in a very safe manner. Our percentage is very high. I'm just kind of a little bit concerned about where we are from an officer safety standpoint. But we'll, as a police, and we always do. We always adjust and we overcome. So I think we'll have to figure out ways to do that.
Yep, I think that's true. And anyone watching this, and you and your squad, I mean, if you guys have feedback, I'm sure that all legislators are going to want to hear from you as
absolutely,
to the aspect.
Absolutely.
The legislation was so big and so comprehensive that there were aspects, I think, that each of us might not have been wild about, but the greater good was the urgency of reform and transparency and all that. Let me shift to another issue. You just mentioned SWAT teams, and through the 911 Commission, the Next Generation 911 Commission that I chair, one of our recommendations has been to increase penalties on swatting. And if folks don't know what that is, that's basically calling and provoking the arrival of a SWAT team.
Right.
So my next door neighbor just murdered his wife, and they show up with, ready for, for violence and blood, and they find out that they're sitting there watching TV.
Yes.
And it happens with a racial component, or their dog peed on my petunias or whatever. So can you talk about swatting, and what, if you have an experience you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, we've had some very disturbing events that have occurred in the county, and we've seen it with high-profile individuals who live in Montgomery County. And one of the persons I remember was Wolf Blitzer from CNN. It happening to his, someone called and had us responding, in an emergency response mode of trying to, deal with something. Proclaiming that someone was murdered at his house, as an example. Wow. And so we've seen this way too many times. And the unfortunate piece is that calls can come from anywhere, almost, across the country, across the world. Yeah. And so we've had experiences with that. I will tell you, but due to the experiences, there are times we're able to really sometimes decipher and figure that this potentially is a swatting call, but it's a major task, right? Because again, we want to get to any true emergency as fast as we can and as quickly as we can in order to help to resolve the situation, and for us to really be having to have to maneuver through these types of situations based upon somebody who just decides that they want to do this for kicks.
Kicks, right? Payback.
I mean, and it's so dangerous in so many ways, right?
Yep.
So the fortunate part here in Montgomery County is no one has gotten injured as a result of it, but our fear is that something might tragically happen, and that's what we don't want.
Well, I hope my legislative colleagues and friends are going to see this and be mindful. We really need to move that forward next year.
Absolutely.
Shifting to another legislative issue, SROs, school resource officers. That came up in my committee. I'm vice chair of education, health, and environmental affairs, and education policies. And SROs in particular came up, and we were really struggling with what to do because each county has a different idea. From a law enforcement perspective, what do you think is a reasonable solution? What makes sense?
Well, I think that I think the reasonable solution that still, I think SROs, I still think are very positive for our schools. I don't think that, I think some of the rhetoric in regards to having a police officer at a school, particularly in our environment, and a variety. I mean, you could have the argument on both sides about, the safety of your school versus, well, some say, the arrest type situations that our officers sometimes get involved in. I think where we're going now with the county, and we're trying to do some redirecting of sort of what our resources are, but what I'm looking at is to really look at the functionality of the SRO at the school, and some of the things that I think that some people think have always been, because we're police officers and we have the right to arrest, individuals who commit certain crimes. I think within the school system, I think there needs to be more focus from the schools about how they want to discipline children or the students within the school system.
Yes.
To be a priority. Now, when it comes to certain crimes, I think that we need to be involved when it comes to victims, victim type crimes, hate crimes, or biases, and some of your more serious violations. But I don't think that, because a kid acts out in school one day and causes a disturbance, you might say, I don't think that that's always the best answer for policing to the end result is that the kid gets arrested. That's not necessarily the best policy, I think. And those are the things I think we have to work through and look at and just understand what is the primary goal of why police officers are in school. And so if the primary mission is about public safety and providing a safe environment, and I think it's great. I think we've got some great success stories about SROs who've developed relationship with kids, and we've been able to really address certain issues that could have caused great harm to some of the schools in our communities. And because of those relationships the SROs had, that's what was able to be a preventative measure more so than a reactive measure, which we don't want to wait till things happen before we get there. We'd rather be on the front side of it.
So from my experience, both as a K through 12 Montgomery County public school student, and then as a substitute teacher, when I was first elected to the House, the SROs were like cool guys who'd walk around and they knew all the kids and kind of knew where the troubles might be, and they were very effective. But I know that doesn't work all the time that way, and so
yeah. And I think departments have to be really specific about the type of officers that they put in their schools.
Yes.
And that's the one thing I think we've learned over the years about, and making sure your officers have a clear direction of what you want from them. And every school is not created equal, right? Every high school has different needs and desires, just like any community. There are certain public safety needs that are at certain locations that aren't at other locations. So we have to be aware of that and be cognizant of it.
Right. So one more legislative issue that I want to flag. So, I have to give a shout out to your officer, Jamie Derbyshire, who I just
she's awesome.
admire. I worked with her for several years on DUID, driving under the influence of drugs.
Yes.
And as you know, conversation continues in Maryland about not just decriminalizing, but legalizing cannabis, marijuana. And what I've seen and the data I've seen around the country is that people drive impaired. And Officer Derbyshire brought me and Senator West to a fascinating 6 hours of watching people get stoned and then do various tests and various skills and all that. Anyway, talk about DUID, driving under the influence of drugs, and I am very concerned about anything being legalized without really important and strong guardrails to make sure we don't have more impaired people on our roadways.
Yeah,
About that.
and I will tell you, I am concerned about that. If if legalization does occur here in Maryland, I think we still see examples of it. It's happening on our roadways now.
Yep.
It's just not much. People don't talk about it much, but the reality is it does exist. I think it will exist even more if legalization occurs, because it's one of those things about education, but people, who are going to do it will probably think, oh, it's less harmful than alcohol. So therefore, they're going to feel like their skills are to drive are just as normal skills would be. And we know that not to be true.
Right.
So I'm gravely concerned about it, because I think that the evidence does support the fact that we've seen, I think in Colorado, when they first legalized it, their collisions went skyrocketed.
Yep.
As a result thereof. And so I think communities have to understand
Yes.
that is still, that's another part of what's happening in our community, that people simply aren't going to just go smoke marijuana in the comfort of their homes and
Right.
not go outside and drive, right? That's still going to occur, and that could be dangerous for us all.
Well, I hope, I'm assuming I will bring this legislation back next year. And I hope that you and others will join me in testifying and offer your expertise.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's pivot again, if we could. Everyone now is a videographer. Everyone now is a photographer. Plus our police wear body cameras. Tell me how that has changed policing on both sides, both the police body worn cameras, as well as knowing that while they're on the clock or off the clock, that they can be captured in action.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed. It is one of the major changes I've seen in my career. Now, I mean, the reality is it's the expectation,
right,
is that every police interaction there's body worn camera footage, which is technically, in a patrol setting, yes, but every police officer doesn't have a body on camera. Our detectives don't carry them. Our undercover, of course, officers don't carry them. Yet, the incidents that they might get involved in are very minimal. But it's good in my opinion. In my opinion, I think body worn cameras have changed policing for the better. And I think because it allows us, as not only as the executive officers, that I see more things today and we see it live, good and bad, right? We see some really good police work being exhibited in many cases, and it really shows where the training that we're providing to our officers is actually being put into use.
Yes.
That's the good stuff, right? And that's important. And there's times that people we talked about earlier about those false allegations. We get false allegations made against officers. We pull out the video and it's not what was said. So that's the good part of that. But the bad is when you see, our officers not acting appropriately or doing something against departmental policy, right? That becomes the disturbing part of it. But I'd rather know that, right? And be able to address it than not know it. So, yes.
So let's pivot to the officers who were just dreadful with the 5-year-old child.
Yes.
I watched the entire video and it was so upsetting.
Right.
Yeah, why don't you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's in litigation, but this is what I will share, and what I've shared publicly is the fact that, again, I was appalled and just really, to this day, still disturbed about the actions of those officers. And this is what I will share. I really put out a message to the entire department. And one thing that I really stress, and no matter what our personal background is and what our thoughts about things in life, such as parenting, as an example, we as police officers, that's not our responsibility to actually explain to any other parent what they should do to their child, right? We should never bring our personal opinions to work from that perspective.
We should
right?
leave marks. Oh my.
That's right. So we we have so professionalism is vitally important. And I've stressed this, and I continue to stress this with my officers to talk about, and again, you get individuals who have their own feelings, and we all have our feelings. I have lots of feelings, but as the chief of police, I also have a role to play in our community as the representative of this police department and representing Montgomery County Police.
Right.
So therefore, we keep our personal feelings in check, right? And we keep them at home and locked in a box, you might say. And so that's one of the things I really want to make sure that our officers understand the importance of remaining professional, no matter what situation they may be placed in.
Yep.
Yeah.
So leaving our feelings at home isn't always easy to do. So
No.
talk to me about how you take care of your own mental health, but how do you take care of your officers? What services are there for their mental health and well-being in these really stressful times and always?
Yeah. So one of the things I think this department has really, I think, invested in, and really, I think many of our members have continue to participate in, is a peer support program. And we speak to our officers often. One of the things I focus on all of our commanders and directors and executive officers and supervisors is always, checking on our people to make sure that they are okay. And if they're not okay, making sure we provide them they understand they have many services available to them, particularly in the county. We have our own police psychologist team that they can actually go see and visit. And in many cases, they utilize that. And particularly during these tough days like this, when, people can be down and out about a lot of different things. So yeah, that's important. I mean, I think we all have to, I say this to I was telling this to one of my officers just last week about, we all have to do our own mental health assessment and check on each other. And many of my staff check on me, right? And just make sure that I'm okay. And I do the same for them, to make sure that, we all get caught up in the whirl of what's happening. And some days aren't good days, and we feel it can be tough. It can be tough. So we want to just keep reminding them of that, and making sure that we all are, again, checking on each other as much as we can.
Yeah. I have two more questions, and then we have to get to the Fast Five, and we're running out of time. So we can do these a little bit quickly.
Okay.
First off, gun control. Can you speak just a few sentences? What's appropriate? Do you have any hope for reasonable gun control legislation?
The main thing I will say with gun control, we really need a good background system that needs to be put into place. That's first and foremost, that I think that would help to be a major force in gun control. Good.
Yes. Amen. I was one of the lobbyists that helped pass the Brady bill, working with Sarah Brady, and a 7-day waiting period, cooling off, and background.
Yes, that's important. Absolutely.
Yeah. The other question, recruitment in these hard times has got to be challenging. And with our police reform, that was something that folks, my Senate colleagues, expressed a lot of concern about. How is recruiting looking prospectively, and how do you focus on recruiting for ethnic and linguistic diversity, which we need here in Montgomery County?
Yeah, so first I'll just say recruiting is a major challenge. It is one of the top challenges that we have. We're having some success, but we're not having the success we would like. We think, again, we're in the midst of a lot of police reform, a lot of discussions. So we're trying to work through those things, and we're trying to come up with different strategies in order to embrace our recruiting. And one of the things I say is that pay means something, and we're in a very competitive market here. So we've got to address this in this competitive market that we are in. And the second was we have a cadet program that we're trying to get more young people, and you don't necessarily have to be young. The cadet program, though, drives through our college requirement, that we actually hire a cadet pay them a half-year salary, and they only work 20 hours a week, but they also are still going to college so that they can get their college degrees.
Perfect.
And so that's helping us to bring a lot of diversity in, and these folks are actually staying with our department. So that's one of the strategies that we're trying to work to try to get a more diverse department.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Chief Jones, this has been a wonderful chat, a wonderful kibitz. And
Yes.
we're going to shift to our fast five.
Okay.
5 quick questions just to let folks know a little bit more about you.
Okay.
Question number 1, what or who inspired you to become a police officer?
My father was a Baltimore City deputy sheriff, and I always looked up to him. Yes.
Okay. Number 2, if you weren't in law enforcement, what alternative career path might you have chosen?
I probably would have went into the business world. Yeah, somewhere in the, where exactly I don't know, but I did major as a business administration. Yes.
Okay. Yep. 3, what's your proudest accomplishment in your career so far?
Becoming chief of police.
I was guessing that might be too easy, actually. In these stressful times with your crazy stressful job, what do you do to relax and laugh when you're off the job?
I like to play golf, and I like to joke with my friends when I'm on the golf course. Right. Yes, absolutely.
Nice. That's good. And the 5th question, the one that I asked everyone, Chief Marcus Jones, what is your hidden secret superpower? What is something that you're really good at that most folks can't do?
Ooh, that's a hard one. What am I really good at most folks can't do? Oh my gosh, I don't even know what the answer is. I don't know. Uh, I guess make people laugh in the most inopportune moments, I guess. I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't know. That's tough.
I like that. I like,
Yeah.
you know that as soon as we hang up, you're going to come up with
I'll
5.
come up with something else. Yeah, of course I will. Yeah, that's a great question. So,
Well, this was a delight. And again, let me just close by saying thank you for your service. Thank you for helping keep Montgomery County a safe and wonderful place to live, work, and raise a family. And we appreciate all that you do every day.
thank you, Senator Kagan, and my pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation, and we'll keep working hard to keep this a safe place. Thank you for all you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Okay, take care.